In July 2026, Tadej Pogačar won his fifth Tour de France at age 27, joining Anquetil, Merckx, Hinault and Indurain as the only riders in history to achieve it. Weeks later, the five-time champion returned to the Vuelta a España for the first time since he was an unknown 20-year-old in 2019, chasing the one Grand Tour still missing from his resume. On August 22nd, he won the Monaco time trial by 0.09 of a second and took the red jersey. 2 days later, violent hail turned a Pyrenean road white, forced riders to seek shelter and cancelled the stage entirely. As of August 25th, his attempt to complete the Grand Tour collection remains unresolved. This is how a boy from Komenda, Slovenia, became the rider the entire peloton measures itself against. A small village nestled within the municipality of Komenda, just north of Ljubljana. As a young boy, Pogačar initially focused on football, but his athletic path shifted when his older brother Tilen began training on the road. Intrigued by the speed, a 9-year-old Pogačar followed his brother to the local ROG Ljubljana cycling club. The club lacked road bikes small enough for him, forcing him to wait, but once he obtained a proper machine, his competitive drive became immediately apparent. Slovenia's cycling culture was entering a quiet renaissance, catalyzed by the emergence of riders like Primož Roglič, which revitalized youth development programs and national infrastructure. In 2011, former World Championship medalist Andrej Hauptmann noticed the young Pogačar during a youth race. Hauptmann observed a tiny boy fighting to catch a group of much older, stronger teenagers trailing 100 meters behind, but refusing to relent. Recognizing an exceptional physiological engine and uncommon determination, Hauptmann became his personal coach, nurturing his progression through the junior and under-23 ranks. Pogačar quickly validated this guidance, developing his climbing and stage racing abilities with victories in prestigious junior stage races, including the Giro della Lunigiana, where his climbing abilities first became clear. In 2018, still only 19, he confirmed his immense international potential by winning the Tour de l'Avenir, the premier under-23 showcase often regarded as a predictor of future Grand Tour success. This definitive performance secured his entry into the World Tour as UAE team Emirates signed the young Slovenian for the 2019 season, initiating a professional career that would soon transform the modern peloton. In late August 2019, the 20-year-old rookie lined up for his first Grand Tour. These grueling 3-week races, held only in France, Italy and Spain, test riders over thousands of kilometers of varying terrain. The ultimate goal is the general classification, which tracks the rider with the lowest cumulative time over 21 stages, alongside specialized jerseys like the Young Rider competition for those under 25. Pogačar entered the Vuelta a España with little pressure, facing established figures like veteran champion Alejandro Valverde and his own dominant compatriot Primož Roglič. His presence quickly shifted from a quiet debut to a serious threat. On stage 9, during a torrential storm in Andorra, Pogačar launched a well-timed attack on the final climb, riding solo through the mud to claim his first Grand Tour stage victory. 4 days later, on stage 13, he proved the win was no fluke. He matched Roglič pedal stroke for pedal stroke on the steepest ramps, distancing the remaining contenders to secure a second mountain victory. The performance that changed everything came on stage 20 in the cold winds of the Sierra de Gredos. Starting the day in 5th place overall, Pogačar launched a massive solo move on the Alto de los Cabrales with 39 kilometers remaining. He quickly built an advantage of over a minute and a half, riding alone through the mountain passes while the veteran chasers struggled to organize a pursuit. The long-range gamble succeeded. Pogačar won the stage, vaulting from 5th to 3rd overall. When the race concluded in Madrid, he secured the white jersey as the best young rider and stood on the final podium in 3rd place. He finished just 2 minutes and 55 seconds behind the winner, Roglič, completing one of the most impressive Grand Tour debuts in modern history. By September 2020, the Tour de France had arrived at its penultimate day, and the math was simple. 21-year-old Tadej Pogačar stood 57 seconds behind his older compatriot, Primož Roglič. Roglič and his dominant Jumbo-Visma team had controlled the race for nearly 3 weeks, seemingly locking up the yellow jersey. But stage 20 offered one final arena, a 36.2-kilometer individual time trial from Lure to the summit of La Planche des Belles Filles. An individual time trial strips away all tactical support. There are no teammates to pull through the wind, no drafting, and no protective shield. It is a solitary struggle against the clock, exposing every rider's physical limits. The route itself demanded a rare physiological compromise. The first 30 kilometers required flat-out aerodynamic efficiency, where riders held a tight tuck to carry maximum speed on rolling roads. Then came the transition to the climb itself, a steep, winding ascent averaging 8.5% gradients. Here, aerodynamic gear became dead weight, forcing riders to switch to lighter road bikes to tackle the brutal double-digit ramps near the summit. Roglič entered the stage as an established Grand Tour champion and time trial specialist, the absolute benchmark of consistency. Yet as the intermediate time checks flashed on the screens, the status quo began to unravel. Pogačar was gaining time. His position on the bike remained rock solid, his pedal stroke fluid and relentless. By the foot of the climb, the 57-second gap had vanished. As Roglič struggled on the steep slopes, his helmet slipping askew as his rhythm broke, Pogačar surged upward. The young Slovenian crossed the finish line to stop the clock at 57 minutes and 16 seconds. He won the stage by a staggering 1 minute and 56 seconds over Roglič, reversing the entire general classification. At just 21 years old, Pogačar secured his first Tour de France victory in one of the most shocking turnarounds in sporting history, demonstrating that the established order could be completely overturned in a single, unassisted effort. Winning a Grand Tour once can be dismissed as a tactical fluke or a rival's bad day. Returning to France in 2021, the young Slovenian faced a far heavier burden, the absolute expectation of repeatability. He was no longer the overlooked challenger, but the rider every team marked. He responded with a clinical, 3-week display of raw power. On stage 5, he dominated the flat time trial to Laval, crushing the specialists on their own terrain. In the Alps, during a freezing, rain-slicked stage 8, he launched a devastating attack on the Col de Rome, riding solo to seize a yellow jersey he would never surrender. By the time the race reached Paris, he had claimed 3 stages and a winning margin of over 5 minutes. Yet his physical engine was already pushing beyond the traditional boundaries of 3-week stage racing. In April, he contested the oldest classic in the world, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Outsprinting world champion Julian Alaphilippe on the flat finish, he secured his first monument victory. 6 months later, he conquered the autumn leaves of Il Lombardia, outsprinting Fausto Masnada in Bergamo to claim a second historic one-day classic in a single season. The performance confirmed that his recovery capabilities and explosive acceleration were not limited to the high Alps of July. He was rewriting the modern calendar, proving a Tour champion could hunt classics as well. But this aggressive, all-terrain style required immense energy. As the 2022 season approached, a quiet threat began to build in the peloton, raising a dangerous question. What happens when an aggressive champion who refuses to calculate his efforts meets a rival capable of finding his absolute physical limit? Enter Jonas Vingegaard. The Danish climber represented a different kind of threat, quiet, exceptionally patient, and backed by a disciplined Jumbo-Visma squad designed to exploit Pogačar's aggressive instincts. On July 13, 2022, during stage 11 of the Tour de France, that plan went into action. On the high slopes of the Col du Galibier, Jumbo-Visma launched a coordinated onslaught. Primož Roglič and Vingegaard took turns attacking, trading blows to force the yellow jersey into a relentless chase. Pogačar, true to his nature, answered every single acceleration himself, refusing to calculate the energy cost. By the time the race hit the final, brutal slopes of the Col du Granon, the strategic trap snapped shut. He was entirely isolated, stripped of his teammates under the sustained pressure of the Dutch squad. With 4 kilometers remaining on the steep alpine climb, Vingegaard launched his decisive move. For the first time in his professional career, Pogačar had no response. His fluid pedal stroke stalled, his pace slowed, and his rivals watched the young champion fight just to keep his wheels turning. Vingegaard seized the stage and the yellow jersey, leaving Pogačar nearly 3 minutes behind. This was more than a lost day in the mountains. It was the first major competitive fracture in an era that had previously known nothing but dominance. On April 23, 2023, during Liège-Bastogne-Liège, a sudden crash fractured the scaphoid bone in Pogačar's left wrist, instantly halting his momentum. Surgery followed immediately to insert a stabilizing screw, triggering a race against a tight recovery window of 4 to 6 weeks. Confined to an indoor trainer with a heavily bandaged arm, his traditional altitude camps and crucial road volume were replaced by stationary sweat. He returned to the road with a supportive brace, but entered the Tour de France with only 2 days of competitive racing in his legs. The subsequent rematch against Jonas Vingegaard, however, transcended the narrative of an incomplete recovery. Pogačar fought tenaciously through the opening phases, but as the race entered the high Alps, the biological reality of his compromised preparation met Vingegaard's clinical consistency. On stage 17, climbing the brutal gradients of the Col de la Loze, Pogačar hit his absolute physical limit. He fell away from the yellow jersey, losing over 5 minutes on a single afternoon. When Vingegaard secured his second consecutive Tour victory in Paris, the cycling world was forced to confront a deeper uncertainty. The Danish climber had exploited his rival's compromised build-up, systematically dismantling him on the longest climbs. It raised a quiet, persistent question: had Vingegaard exposed a permanent ceiling to Pogačar's aggressive racing identity? If his rivals had designed a blueprint to contain him in the high mountains, Pogačar expanded his battlefield. He turned his attention to the grueling, chaotic world of the Spring Classics, redefining what a modern Grand Tour champion could achieve. In cycling, a monument represents the peak of one-day racing. Unlike the calculated 3-week chess match of a Grand Tour, these 5 historic races are brutal, single-day marathons spanning nearly 300 kilometers over narrow, punishing roads. A single tactical error or mechanical failure ends the day immediately. The Tour of Flanders served as the supreme test of this evolution. Winning on the Belgian cobbles requires a different physiological engine than climbing alpine passes. It demands explosive bursts of power over short vertical walls and intense positioning battles before the narrow roads choke the peloton. Here, Pogačar faced Mathieu van der Poel, the undisputed yardstick of classics racing, whose explosive sprint and flawless handling on the cobbles made him a formidable adversary. Instead of trying to drop Van der Poel on pure gradient, Pogačar relied on precise timing, launching a decisive attack on the Eau de Quaremont to secure the victory. At Strade Bianche, on the white gravel roads of Tuscany, he proved this versatility with an 81-kilometer solo victory. These races revealed a complete all-terrain profile, fusing high aerobic capacity with the raw, explosive power needed to survive the rugged classics. By transitioning from a pure Grand Tour contender to an all-terrain specialist, Pogačar challenged the traditional limits of the sport, proving that a modern champion could conquer every road. After standing on the second step of the podium in Paris for 2 consecutive years, the response from Pogačar and UAE team Emirates was to systematically restructure his entire athletic year. The team's performance staff shifted his focus away from a single, hyper-focused peak in July, designing a multi-objective campaign for 2024. Under updated coaching direction, his training structure became highly methodical, replacing instinctive road miles with precisely managed workloads. Fueling became a primary area of verified adjustment. The performance staff overhauled his carbohydrate intake during long training blocks and races, significantly increasing his hourly carbohydrate consumption to prevent the sudden energy depletions that his rivals had previously exploited in the high Alps. Alongside nutrition, recovery protocols became strict performance requirements. The team used data tracking to monitor physical strain, sleep quality, and cardiac variability, ensuring he absorbed the heavy training blocks without crossing into overtraining. By collaborating closely with UAE's technical specialists, Pogačar also focused on aerodynamic efficiency and specific heat adaptation protocols. Every modification was tracked and analyzed, aiming to build a more resilient athletic engine. This overhaul was not about chasing a single performance metric, but about creating a durable system capable of sustaining peak output across multiple 3-week objectives. The raw, aggressive racer of his early career was becoming a highly calibrated athlete, prepared to face the most demanding calendar of his life. In May 2024, Tadej Pogačar lined up in Turin for his debut Giro d'Italia, aiming to secure the first leg of a historic double. From the opening week, UAE team Emirates established systematic control over the general classification, riding a high-tempo strategy that suffocated rival attacks. But the apparent ease of his performance disguised the immense physical toll. On the steep slopes of the mountains, Pogačar launched calculated, high-cadence accelerations, capturing 6-stage victories and securing the Blue Mountains jersey. In the individual time trials, he rode with refined aerodynamic efficiency, extending his lead over second-placed Daniel Martinez to a staggering 9 minutes and 56 seconds by the time he reached Rome. Yet as he stood on the final podium wearing the pink jersey, the primary challenge was just beginning. Winning a 3-week Grand Tour drains deep metabolic reserves. With only 34 days separating the finish in Italy from the start of the Tour de France, his coaching staff faced an unprecedented recovery puzzle. No rider in the 21st century had successfully conquered both races in a single season. The physical fatigue accumulated in the Italian Alps was a silent threat, leaving his upcoming French campaign suspended in extreme uncertainty. On April 4, 2024, a devastating crash at the Itzulia Basque country altered the entire trajectory of the summer. Jonas Vingegaard lay in a Spanish hospital with a fractured collarbone, broken ribs, and a collapsed lung, leaving his Tour de France defense in extreme jeopardy. When both riders arrived in Florence for the Grand Depart, the classic rivalry carried entirely new parameters. Pogačar was managing the metabolic fatigue of his victorious Italian campaign, while Vingegaard was racing against his own incomplete rehabilitation. The road quickly exposed the tactical shifts. Rather than waiting for the high Alps, UAE team Emirates used their collective strength to pressure the Danish champion early. On the second stage over the San Luca climb, Pogačar launched an explosive acceleration testing Vingegaard's recovery. The Dane matched the move, proving his resilience, but the strategic initiative had shifted. The definitive battles unfolded in the Pyrenees. On stage 14 to Pla d'Adet, UAE team Emirates executed a precise tactical plan. Adam Yates attacked ahead to act as a mobile bridge, allowing Pogačar to launch a searing acceleration with 4 kilometers remaining. Vingegaard pursued, but the gap widened meter by meter. The following day on the brutal slopes of Plateau de Bale, Vingegaard and his Visma-Lease bike squad attempted to replicate their previous high-altitude suffocating tactics, setting a blistering pace to isolate the Slovene. But a highly disciplined Pogačar remained calm, countered the final move, and rode solo to another commanding victory. When the race concluded with an individual time trial in Nice, Pogačar secured his 5th stage win of the race, sealing the yellow jersey by 6 minutes and 17 seconds over Vingegaard. In doing so, he completed the first Giro Tour double since 1998, a feat of endurance that redefined modern physiological limits. Reclaiming the yellow jersey did not erase his previous defeats, but it answered the tactical questions of the past 2 years, demonstrating that a highly calibrated training approach could conquer both the high mountains and his greatest rival. On September 29, 2024, the elite men's road race at the World Championships in Zurich, Switzerland, presented a brutal 273.9-kilometer course featuring 4,470 meters of climbing. With exactly 100 kilometers remaining, long before any team expected the serious contenders to move, Pogačar accelerated. A move from this distance violates standard modern racing logic. At 100 kilometers out, a solo rider faces a severe aerodynamic disadvantage against a chasing peloton. The chasing teams must balance the urge to panic with the necessity of saving energy, often leading to hesitation among rivals who assume the attacker will eventually fade. But Pogačar did not fade. He bridged to an early breakaway, rode with Pavel Sivakov, and then dropped him on a climb with over 50 kilometers still to play. Riding the final 50 kilometers entirely alone through the rain, he held his speed on the technical descents and relentless 6 to 8% gradients. He crossed the line to secure a solo victory, finishing 34 seconds ahead of silver medalist Ben O'Connor, with Mathieu van der Poel taking third. This victory completed the historic Triple Crown of cycling, winning the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France, and the Road World Championships in a single season. Only 2 men had ever accomplished this specific sweep before, Eddy Merckx in 1974 and Steven Roche in 1987. It is not an official race series, but rather a rare physical feat that requires sustaining peak performance from May through September. By adding the rainbow jersey to his 5 Tour titles, Pogačar expanded his reach far past traditional stage racing. Yet even with this historic achievement, his competitive collection remained unfinished. significant races still resisted his grasp, leaving major targets on his calendar for the seasons ahead. In 2025, Pogačar lined up for 50 race days, securing 20 victories, a 40% win rate. He captured his 5th Tour de France title, matching the standard of historic champions and elevating his career Grand Tour stage wins past 70. In the spring and autumn, he added 3 more monument classics to his growing palmares. Yet this statistical dominance masked a fundamental change in how the public viewed his performances. Winning had become the expected baseline. When Pogačar crossed a finish line first, it was treated as a routine result. When he lost, it became a major sporting headline. Despite the high win rate, the season proved he was not invincible. On the cobbled roads of Europe and the steep climbs of the Spring Classics, Mathieu van der Poel and a resilient Jonas Vingegaard forced him to fight for every meter, exposing moments where his aggressive style could be neutralized. In key head-to-head battles, his rivals demonstrated that with perfect timing, high power output, and disciplined squad tactics, the 5-time Tour champion could still be beaten. The narrow margins of elite cycling remained, showing that even at the peak of his physical capabilities, absolute control over the road was impossible. Following the physical expansion of his 2024 season, Milan-San Remo and Paris-Roubaix remained unresolved technical problems, requiring entirely different tactical frameworks. For a rider aiming to master every aspect of the sport, these races stood as the ultimate tests of versatility. Milan-San Remo represents a test of extreme patience. For nearly 300 kilometers, the peloton keeps a rapid but controlled tempo before the race explodes on the Cipressa and the Poggio. Success on the Italian coast demands flawless positioning before the final climbs, high-speed descending on narrow, twisting asphalt, and highly calculated sprint judgment in a chaotic finish. The final descent off the Poggio requires taking extreme risks on blind corners, where launching an acceleration a fraction of a second too early on the Via Roma completely neutralizes a superior engine. Paris-Roubaix presents a completely different physiological trial. The brutal, flat, cobbled sectors of northern France require specialized muscular endurance to absorb relentless road vibrations, precise bike handling on slick mud, and constant exposure to race-ending crashes on the uneven stones. Sectors like the Arenberg Forest force riders to sustain massive torque over bone-shaking terrain, where climbing power is secondary to raw, sustained watt production and the mechanical durability of highly specialized equipment. By the close of the 2026 Spring Classics, the verified record showed how Pogačar managed these distinct physical demands. He solved the high-speed tactical equation of Milan-San Remo, capturing a landmark victory. Yet Paris-Roubaix proved more resistant to his all-terrain capabilities. Despite adjusting his training zones and mastering the heavy handling required for the stones, his effort ended with a runner-up finish on the historic velodrome. These verified outcomes defined the razor-thin line between victory and defeat, turning these historic one-day races into a source of constant strategic pressure as his focus returned to the Grand Tours, where a pursuit of a record 5th Tour de France awaited. Racing for UAE team Emirates XRG, he solved the tactical puzzle of Milan-San Remo to claim a landmark victory before securing a runner-up finish on the brutal stones of Paris-Roubaix. Weeks later, he added the Tour de Romandie overall title to his palmarès, confirming his versatile form before pivoting fully toward France. By July, his objective was singular, a 5th Tour de France title at just 27 years of age. Only 4 legendary figures, Jacques Anquetil, Eddy Merckx, Bernard Hinault, and Miguel Indurain, had ever stood atop the Tour podium 5 times. Entering the race, the challenge was formidable. Jonas Vingegaard arrived fresh from a dominant Giro d'Italia victory, while Remco Evenepoel and Spanish climber Isaac del Toro brought aggressive, high-altitude squads designed to isolate the defending champion on the longest climbs. The defining collision occurred on stage 19, climbing the 21 hairpin bends of Alpe d'Huez. Vingegaard and Evenepoel launched successive attacks, pushing Pogačar's physiological limits on the steep gradients. But Pogačar remained patient, relying on his optimized fueling and disciplined pace. On the upper slopes, he countered with a signature high-cadence acceleration, riding solo through the dense crowds to win the stage. In doing so, he shattered the legendary Alpe d'Huez climbing record previously held by Marco Pantani since 1995. When Pogačar crossed the final finish line, he secured his 5th Tour de France title, matching the historic standard of the sport's greatest icons. With 36 Grand Tour stage victories now to his name, this crowning achievement moved him past contemporary rivalries and directly into the ultimate historical debate. At 27, he had constructed a legacy comparable to the giants of the 20th century, yet his career remained far from finished. Matching 5 Tour de France victories inevitably invites comparison to Eddy Merckx, the undisputed standard of the 20th century. With 11 Grand Tour victories, 19 Monument Classics, and 525 professional wins, Merckx constructed a record that remains mathematically supreme. His era allowed for an immense calendar volume, where riders raced relentlessly from February to October on steel frames, relying on basic team structures, rudimentary nutrition, and limited athletic controls. Pogacar, by contrast, establishes his case through modern versatility. Winning multiple Monument Classics, a Giro Tour double, and a World Championship in the same season requires conquering a hyper-specialized peloton. Today's professional cycling leaves no room for casual dominance. Every rival benefits from wind tunnel testing, optimized carbohydrate fueling, and scientific coaching under strict anti-doping protocols. The argument for Merckx rests on unmatched volume and a career of total conquest. The case for Pogačar rests on his ability to win across every terrain against the broadest, most scientifically prepared field in the history of the sport. Because the equipment, team structures, and training environments are entirely different, a direct comparison remains imperfect. The title of greatest of all time cannot be resolved by a statistics sheet alone. That judgment belongs to the audience, shifting the focus from what was won to the raw physical engine that makes these performances possible. Exceptional aerobic efficiency and a high power-to-weight ratio allow Pogačar to match pure climbers on steep mountain passes, yet his defining physical advantage is fatigue resistance. After burning thousands of kilojoules over 5 hours of hard racing, he experiences almost zero drop-off in explosive power, maintaining his capacity to accelerate when others are fighting simply to stay on the wheel. This repeatability is sustained by a modern approach to fueling. By systematically maximizing his carbohydrate intake during races, the team has protected his metabolic reserves, eliminating the sudden energy depletions that once threatened his Grand Tour campaigns. But this physical engine does not operate in a vacuum. UAE team Emirates XRG has built a highly coordinated performance system around him. World-class teammates manage the wind, control breakaways, and set a suffocating pace that isolates his rivals. Behind the scenes, the team's coaching staff, sports scientists, and technical partners refine every variable. Mechanics optimize his carbon road bike for weight and rolling resistance, while technical specialists use wind tunnel data to maximize his aerodynamic efficiency on flat runs and high-speed descents. Before a race even begins, rigorous route reconnaissance maps every technical corner, road hazard, and steep gradient. During the stage, race directors feed real-time pacing calculations and weather updates through his earpiece, while dedicated staff manage precise recovery protocols the moment he crosses the finish line. Yet this scientific infrastructure is designed to support his effort rather than dictate his actions. High-performance coaching and optimized equipment expand his tactical options, but they cannot replace his instincts. No single physiological number or laboratory secret can predict a winning move. When the race reaches its decisive moments, Pogačar relies on direct tactical judgment. He gauges his opponent's fatigue, chooses the precise distance and timing of his attack, and takes the high-speed risks on technical descents that turn scientific preparation into victories. Behind the high-performance coaching and aerodynamic testing remains the kid from Komenda who simply enjoys riding his road bike. He often races with tufts of hair poking through his helmet, a visual trademark that mirrors his aggressive, almost playful style on the road. This energy is matched by a direct, candid public personality, offering a refreshing contrast in a highly calculated sport. Away from the noise of the race caravan, Pogačar maintains a quiet life in Monaco with his partner Urška Zigart, who is also a professional cyclist competing at the sport's highest international level. Their shared professional background provides a natural, unspoken understanding of the relentless training, strict recovery protocols, and constant travel demanded by the World Tour calendar. In his public statements, Pogačar consistently presents cycling as an enjoyable pursuit rather than a stressful obligation. This balanced outlook protects the five-time champion from the crushing weight of public expectations, keeping him grounded as his focus returns to the competitive road ahead. On August 22, 2026, the Vuelta a España began on the rolling, sunlit coastal streets of Monaco. For Tadej Pogačar, this opening 9.4-kilometer individual time trial represented a clean homecoming. It was his first return to the Spanish Grand Tour since his breakout debut in 2019. 7 years prior, he was an unheralded 20-year-old rookie chasing an improbable podium spot. Now he rolled down the starter's ramp as a five-time Tour de France champion, the defining benchmark of his generation, racing past his own apartment. The technical high-speed course demanded absolute precision. Pogačar stopped the clock at 10 minutes and 57.14 seconds. The victory was decided by millimeters. Ethan Hayter finished just 0.09 of a second slower, with Joshua Tarling taking third, 4 seconds back. By this razor-thin margin, Pogačar secured the stage and pulled on the red leader's jersey for the first time in his career. The carefree rookie had become a highly calibrated master of execution. In his adopted home, the pursuit of his final missing Grand Tour had begun. The morning of August 23rd brought the longest day of the race, a demanding 223.2-kilometer route from Monaco to Merckx, packing nearly 3,000 meters of climbing. As the peloton neared the finish, the tactical chess match intensified. Inside the final 2 kilometers, Visma bike applied intense pressure. Wout van Aert launched a fierce acceleration, forcing the remaining contenders to make a rapid choice. Pogačar faced a direct decision: burn valuable energy chasing down the explosive classic specialist or ride defensively to protect his overall advantage. He chose calculation over reaction. While Van Aert's surge set up his teammate Matthew Brennan to capture his first Grand Tour sprint victory, Pogačar monitored the gaps from behind. He refused to panic, launching his own sprint to cross the line in third place with the same time as the winner. By securing 4 bonus seconds and neutralizing the late threat, Pogačar successfully defended his leadership, keeping the red jersey on his shoulders as the race headed toward the high peaks of the Pyrenees. On August 24th, the Pyrenean climb toward Font-Romeu was meant to provide the first real mountain selection of the race. Instead, a sudden, violent hailstorm and torrential rain turned the mountain road into a dangerous white sheet of ice. The storm knocked out communication with the race helicopters, forcing riders to halt and scramble for shelter under shop awnings and team cars, with Pogačar himself guiding peers off the hazardous descent. With rider safety compromised, officials made the rare decision to cancel the stage entirely. There was no winner, no recorded times, and no change to the general classification. On the morning of August 25th, the race stood suspended in this state of sudden pause, with Pogačar holding his paper-thin margin of 0.09 of a second over Ethan Hayter. The upcoming mountain paths of Andorra offer immediate physical danger, but the road ahead is defined by what remains unwritten. For a competitor who has spent his career systematically conquering every major cycling milestone, this moment in Spain represents a pursuit of absolute completeness. The Vuelta overall title remains the only Grand Tour missing from his collection, while the brutal stones of Paris-Roubaix stand as his other great unfinished challenge. Securing both would place him in a historic dimension of versatility that transcends modern eras. Yet as the peloton prepares to restart, there are no guarantees, no final career verdicts, and no predetermined outcomes. The story remains active, dangerous, and completely open. Has Pogačar already done enough to be called the greatest cyclist of all time, or does he still have to catch Eddy Merckx? Subscribe to the Cycling Report. Today, the road ahead remains entirely unwritten. As the peloton restarts, we are not watching a retired Legends Museum exhibit, but a historic career unfolding in real time. The ultimate measure of Tadej Pogačar isn't the number of trophies already in his case, but his relentless hunger for the next horizon. We are witnessing a living monument of sport being built stone by stone, and the final shape of his legacy is still ours to discover.